Hey guys, Joe from Treadmill Heroes here. I want to give you some basic troubleshooting things to look at when it comes to your treadmill at home. One of the most common calls we get is, my treadmill doesn't work. Okay, great. Well, we got to dive in a little bit and find out what that means. So when you call into us for service, we're going to ask you a series of questions, which I might as well ask those to you now, because you might be able to do the repair by yourself and just call us and order a part that you need, and we can ship it right to you. But the first question we typically ask is, when the treadmill stopped working, were you actually using it at the time? Or did you just go down to your basement and hit start and it didn't come on? Okay? Let's go with the first one. You were in the middle of a workout and then all of a sudden your belt just stopped. Okay. First question, does your panel still light up? Some people call this a panel, some people call it a console. But I want to know is, if you plug the machine in and turn it on, does this still power on? Great. When you hit the start button, does it still count down? 3, 2, 1. And then typically your belt would move, but in this case, it doesn't move. All the time, if you come in a little bit closer here, we can kind of hear this. When you go to start your treadmill, you'll hear a click before the motor starts moving. I don't know if you guys heard that series of clicks right there, but that's something that you want to listen to. That's a relay in this circuit board here, clicking over to feed power into your drive motor. And if you don't hear that click, that typically means that the relay board or the relay component inside of your lower control board down here has gone bad. So listen for the click. If you don't hear a click at all after you hit the start button, then we probably have an issue here. Especially if you were in the middle of a workout and it just stopped. We want to focus on this. Now, it could be a case that you have a bad drive motor. And there's a couple things that you can do at home to test your drive motor. First of all, unplug your machine from the wall so there's no power going to it. And most home treadmills have a DC motor, which means it's run on DC current like what comes out of a battery. Part of the job of this motor control board here, this circuit board, is to convert the AC power coming out of the wall into DC power to feed your motor. Most treadmills, motors at home have a red and a black wire, right? So inside of a DC motor, it's basically a generator, magnets and stuff. Now, when you freely spin your belt, look, I can push that belt and it moves about another 8 inches to a foot with a little bit of a nudge there. But since this is basically a big magnet inside of here, if you cross the 2 points with, let's say, a paper clip, it'll create continuity through the 2 points, and it basically functions as a magnet. Now when I go to push that, I can barely move the belt. That's a way to know if your motor's good. If all the windings in here are still good and nothing has shorted out in the motor, it's creating a real hard resistance. Now when I pull this paper clip out, the belt, I mean, you can see a huge difference in how easy and how far I can move the belt. Another way to test your drive motor is you can take a fully charged 9-volt battery. It's got to be fully charged. Or better yet, a little bit bigger battery, like one here out of my DeWalt drill. And you have on here a B plus and a B minus, which is basically your power source coming out of the battery. So you can break your paper clip in half, feed it into those 2 points. You might get a little spark here, but nothing that's going to hurt you. And if your motor's good, the battery will power the motor. You'll get that same kind of movement. You'll get movement like that out of a fully charged 9-volt battery, but it won't go near as far. The 9 volts just not really strong enough to move it at that speed. The other thing you could do is just manually roll this drive belt off so it's just the motor spinning, and it won't be as hard for the 9-volt, but I'd recommend a little bit bigger battery if you have one. So cross the 2 points of the paper clip, see if it's hard to push it or spin the motor. That means you've got good connection. You can also test it with a battery. More often than not, your problem usually lies within this lower control board. The other question that we will ask is, okay, let's say you weren't just using it. Maybe it's been a while since you've used your treadmill, and you call us and say, hey, I went to use my treadmill and it doesn't work. Okay, well, has it recently been moved? That's the first question we typically ask, because damage to a treadmill when it gets moved is fairly common. So what happens is when you have to move a big piece of exercise equipment like this, a lot of times you have to take it apart. And by taking it apart, usually it involves taking all the upright components off, and then you just have a flat deck. Well, down here is what we typically will call the data cable. This guy right here. They all look a little different. Some of them look like an Ethernet cord. Some of them have like a 10-pin connection, whatever the case is. But this, what we call a data cable, is essentially like the spinal cord of the treadmill. It's what communicates from the brain up top down to the rest of the body to make the treadmill move. When these treadmills get moved, a very common thing that happens is this data cable gets pinched, it gets cut, or it doesn't get disconnected from the lower board altogether. And when the uprights go to come off, it pulls this housing loose or it breaks the wire. So if the tread worked before you moved it, and then you got it to the destination and plugged it all back in and put it back together and it didn't work, inspect that data cable as well. Look at where it runs through the upright. Maybe it got pinched initially when you got it, and just by moving it, the wires became unpinched or whatever, and that connection that was still good is no good anymore. Does the panel itself power on at all? Another thing that we sell a lot of consoles to people through our other company, fitnessgraveyard.com. So they'll go on our website and they'll order a console because the treadmill console itself doesn't power on at all, and they think that's what the problem is. Very well could be, but I will say that it's fairly rare to have a treadmill console be bad and it doesn't power on at all. Typically we'll see like half the lights burnt out or half the buttons don't work. Then that's a no-brainer. You probably need an upper panel here or a console. But if this isn't powering on at all, it's typically because it's just not getting power. So there again, inspect that data cable. Make sure that you're getting power out of the wall. Silly enough, we have people that will call us to come out, and it happens, they just happen to trip a breaker in their house and the outlet's dead. So always test the outlet with a lamp or a vacuum or something like that. Make sure that that outlet is still hot. Another quick thing that you can test, or just ensure your treadmill's plugged back in. With this particular brand of treadmill and others, nothing happens up on the console without the safety key. Sometimes people will have the safety key off to the side. They just won't notice that it got moved or it got lost. Maybe one of your kids took this and you're just not used to even messing with this thing, and you go to start it, it doesn't work. Make sure that the safety key is in the proper spot. There's a lot of brands that it won't power on without the safety key. So those are a few tips for you guys. Hope this helps.